What happens when a golden Hollywood darling refuses to smile, refuses to play along, and instead turns the tables live on television? The studio lights burn hotter than usual that morning. The cameras glide into position like silent predators, circling their prey. The set of The View hums with its usual polished energy. Coffee mugs aligned, cue cards stacked, producers whispering through headsets. But beneath that glossy surface, something feels off. Tense, like the air itself is holding its breath. Because today Margot Robbie is here. And not everyone at that table is ready for what she's about to bring. Before we dive into this moment that shook daytime television, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Because stories like this, they don't come around often. The applause sign flashes. The audience erupts. Whoopi Goldberg sits at the center, composed as ever. Chin slightly raised, eyes calm but sharp. She's done this 1,000 times. Nothing surprises her anymore. Or so she thinks. Margot walks out to thunderous applause, her smile radiant but measured. Not the carefree, glowing grin the audience expects. There's something more controlled about it. Something guarded. She waves, graceful, poised. But her eyes? They scan the table quickly, briefly locking onto Whoopi. A flicker. Almost imperceptible. Whoopi notices. "Welcome, Margot," Whoopi says warmly, gesturing toward the seat beside her. Margot sits, crossing her legs elegantly. "Thank you for having me." Her voice is calm. Polite. But there's an edge beneath it, like a blade wrapped in silk. The segment begins lightly enough. Discussion of her latest film, the challenges of production, the excitement of stepping into bold roles. The hosts nod, laugh, lean in. Everything feels normal. But then, like a shift in wind before a storm, Whoopi leans forward. There's a pause. A subtle one. But it lands. "You've been getting a lot of attention lately," Whoopi begins, her tone thoughtful but weighted. "Some people feel like your recent roles lean a little too much into spectacle over substance." The audience murmurs softly. Margot's smile doesn't disappear. But it tightens. She tilts her head slightly. "That's interesting." Whoopi continues, her voice steady. "I mean, Hollywood has a history of building up actresses and then packaging them in a way that's more about image than depth. Do you ever worry about that?" The question hangs in the air. It's not aggressive, but it's not neutral either. Margot exhales slowly, fingers resting lightly on her knee. She nods once, as if acknowledging the weight of the question. Inside, though, something shifts. You can see it in her eyes. "I think," Margot says carefully, "that it's easy to assume you understand someone's choices from the outside." The audience quiets. Whoopi leans back slightly, watching her. "And I think," Margot continues, her voice gaining a subtle firmness, "that sometimes people confuse visibility with simplicity." A few heads in the audience tilt. The tension is building, but it's still controlled. Still polite. Whoopi smiles faintly. "Fair enough. But do you think the industry sometimes rewards that kind of visibility over real artistic risk?" There it is. The edge sharpens. Margot's gaze doesn't waver now. "I think the industry rewards what it understands," she replies. "And sometimes it doesn't understand risk until after it pays off." A small ripple of applause. Whoopi nods slowly, but her expression shifts, just slightly. "You're saying people don't recognize it until it's successful?" "I'm saying," Margot says, leaning forward just a fraction, "that it's easy to critique from a distance. It's harder to actually step into something uncertain and commit to it fully." The room tightens. The co-hosts glance at each other. This isn't the usual back and forth. This feels personal. Whoopi's eyes narrow ever so slightly, not in anger but in focus. She's listening now, really listening. "Are you saying criticism isn't valid?" she asks. Margot shakes her head gently. "Not at all. I think criticism is essential. But I also think context matters. And intention." Her tone is still calm. But now there's something unmistakable beneath it. A quiet defiance. The audience senses it. You can feel it in the way the applause has stopped. In the way even the producers behind the cameras have gone still. Whoopi leans in again, resting her hands on the table. "And what do you think people are missing about your intention?" There's a beat. A long one. Margot's eyes flicker downward for a split second, then back up. Stronger. Clearer. "I think," she says slowly, "people sometimes underestimate how much thought goes into what they dismiss." Silence. Absolute silence. It's no longer just an interview. It's a line being drawn. And everyone in that room knows it. One of the co-hosts shifts in her seat, attempting a light laugh. Well, I think audiences are definitely responding. Your films are doing incredibly well. Margot smiles politely, but she doesn't take the escape route. Not this time. Success doesn't always mean people understand what you're trying to do, she says. Whoopi's eyebrow lifts slightly. And what are you trying to do? She asks. There it is. The question that changes everything. Margot inhales. And for the first time since she sat down, her composure cracks, just enough to reveal something deeper. Not anger. Not frustration. Resolve. I'm trying, she says, her voice quieter now but more powerful, to make choices that challenge expectations. Not just for audiences, but for people who think they already have me figured out. The words land like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples spread instantly. Whoopi doesn't respond right away. She studies Margot, really studies her. And in that moment, something unspoken passes between them. Recognition, perhaps. Or confrontation. The audience leans forward collectively, as if pulled by gravity. Because now, this isn't about movies anymore. It's about perception, power, and who gets to define it. Whoopi finally speaks, her voice lower now, more deliberate. Sounds like you've got something to prove. Margot's lips curve slightly, not quite a smile. No, she says. A pause. I think I already have. The room erupts. Gasps. Applause. A few stunned laughs. The energy explodes, but at the table, the tension remains thick and electric. Whoopi leans back slowly, folding her hands. And for the first time since the segment began, she doesn't have the next question ready. The cameras keep rolling. The audience keeps reacting. But something has shifted. Completely. Because Margot Robbie didn't just answer a question. She pushed back. And this? This is only the beginning. The applause doesn't fade all at once. It fractures, breaks into pockets of uneasy clapping and whispered reactions. Some in the audience are still processing what just happened. Others are already leaning toward each other, eyebrows raised, silently asking the same question. Did that just happen? At the table, the energy has shifted from polished daytime charm to something far more unpredictable. The kind of tension you can't script, can't smooth over with a commercial break. Margot Robbie sits still, composed, but no longer playing defense. Her posture has changed in a way that's subtle but undeniable. Shoulders squared, chin slightly lifted. She's not just answering questions anymore. She's holding ground. Across from her, Whoopi Goldberg studies her with a new level of focus. The casual rhythm of hosting is gone. This is something else now, something closer to a duel than a discussion. One of the co-hosts clears her throat lightly, trying to restore balance. Well, that's definitely a perspective, she says with a soft laugh, glancing between them. And I think a lot of actors struggle with that, right? Being misunderstood. Margot turns her head slightly, acknowledging her. But her attention drifts back to Whoopi almost immediately. Of course, Margot says. But there's a difference between being misunderstood and being reduced. The word lands heavier than anything she's said so far. Reduced. It echoes. Whoopi tilts her head. Reduced how? Margot doesn't hesitate this time. Into something easier to critique, she replies. Something that fits a narrative people are more comfortable with. A murmur ripples through the audience again. Whoopi's fingers tap lightly against the table, once, twice, then still. And what narrative is that? She asks. There's a sharpness in her tone now, not hostile, but no longer neutral. Margot's gaze holds steady. That I'm just what you see on the surface. A beat. A face. A brand. A moment. The words come out evenly, but there's weight behind them, years of it. And you feel that's how people here see you? Whoopi presses, gesturing subtly to the table, to the space around them. The question is direct. So is the silence that follows. For a split second, it feels like the entire room freezes. Even the cameras seem to hesitate. Margot inhales slowly. You can see the calculation, the awareness of the moment, the understanding of how easily this could tip from tension into something irreversible. But then, I think, she says carefully, that conversations like this can lean in that direction. Not an accusation, but not a retreat either. A few audible gasps ripple through the audience. One of the co-hosts shifts forward quickly. I don't think anyone here is trying to box you in, she interjects, her tone warm but urgent. We're just exploring how the industry works, how it treats women, especially. I agree, Margot says, nodding once. But sometimes the way we explore that can unintentionally reinforce it. That lands. Harder than expected. Because now it's not just about her, it's about them. Whoopi's expression tightens just slightly. Not anger, something more complex. A mix of curiosity and resistance. So you think we're part of the problem, she says. Margot's eyes soften, but her voice doesn't. I think everyone in this industry has a role in shaping perception, she replies. Including me. The audience quiets again. That answer diffuses the edge, just a little. But the tension doesn't disappear. It shifts. Whoopi leans back, folding her arms loosely. You know, she begins, her voice slower now, more reflective. I've been in this business a long time. And I've seen how quickly it can build someone up, and then turn on them. Margot listens closely. And sometimes, Whoopi continues, the criticism comes from a place of wanting more. Not less. A pause. More depth. More risk. More truth. The words hang in the air between them. Margot nods once, acknowledging it. I understand that, she says. And I respect it. But then, she leans forward slightly, and the room leans with her. But I also think, she adds, that what looks like less from the outside can actually be something very different when you're the one making the choices. Whoopi's gaze sharpens again. Explain that. Margot doesn't look away. Not every risk is loud, she says. Not every bold choice looks serious or dramatic or traditionally important. Her voice grows more assured with each word. Sometimes the risk is doing something people don't expect you to take seriously, and committing to it fully anyway. A few scattered claps begin in the audience. Then more. Because now something is clicking. But Whoopi isn't done. So when people question those choices, she says, you feel like they're missing the point. Margot's answer is immediate. I feel like they're choosing a version of the point that's easier to critique. Another ripple. Stronger this time. One of the co-hosts exhales audibly, half laughing. This is getting deep for a morning show, she says, trying to lighten the mood. A few people laugh. But it doesn't break the tension. Because at the center of it, the exchange continues, focused, deliberate, unflinching. Whoopi leans forward again, her voice quieter now. Or maybe, she says, they're holding you to a higher standard. There it is. The shift. Not criticism. Expectation. Margot pauses. And for the first time since the conversation escalated, there's a flicker of something more vulnerable in her expression. But it's gone almost as quickly as it appears. I'm okay with high standards, she says. What I'm not okay with is being defined by them before I've had the chance to define myself. Silence. Deep, heavy silence. The kind that settles into your chest. Because now this isn't just a debate. It's personal. Whoopi studies her again, longer this time. And when she speaks, her tone has changed. Less challenging. More probing. Do you think you haven't had that chance yet? Margot lets out a quiet breath. I think, she says slowly, I'm still in the middle of it. The honesty in that answer lands differently. It softens the room, but deepens the moment. Because now, beneath the sharp dialogue and the layered tension, something else is emerging. Respect. Complicated, reluctant, but real. One of the co-hosts nods, leaning in. That's fair, she says. I think audiences are still discovering different sides of you. Margot smiles faintly. So am I. A small ripple of laughter follows, gentler this time. But Whoopi doesn't smile. Not yet. She's still watching Margot, as if trying to decide something. Then, you know what this sounds like to me? Whoopi says. The room stills again. Margot meets her gaze. What? She asks. Whoopi leans in, her voice low but clear. It sounds like you're pushing back against the box, but you're still inside it. The words hit like a spark in dry air. Immediate. Dangerous. The audience reacts instantly, gasps, murmurs, a few sharp intakes of breath. Margot doesn't move. Doesn't blink. For a moment, it looks like time has paused entirely. Because this is the line. And everyone knows it. What happens next will define everything that follows. The air doesn't just tense, it tightens like a wire pulled to its absolute limit. You can feel it in the stillness of the audience, in the way no one shifts in their seat anymore, in the way even the soft hum of the studio seems to vanish into the background. It sounds like you're pushing back against the box, but you're still inside it. Whoopi's words linger, sharp and deliberate. And for a moment, Margot Robbie doesn't respond. She just looks at her. Really looks at her. Not as a host. Not as a legend. But as someone who just drew a line and dared her to cross it. The silence stretches. A second. 2. 3. Long enough to become uncomfortable. long enough that one of the producers off camera shifts, whispering urgently into a headset, long enough that the audience begins to wonder if this is where it breaks. But then, Margot exhales, slowly, and something changes, not in her posture, not in her expression, but in her presence. Because when she speaks this time, there's no careful calibration, no polite cushioning, just clarity. Maybe, she says, her voice calm but unmistakably firm. The box only exists if you accept the way it's defined. The words land clean, precise, and the reaction is immediate, scattered gasps, a ripple of low murmurs that sweep across the audience like wind through tall grass. Whoopi doesn't move, but her eyes sharpen. That's a nice idea, she replies, her tone even, but the industry doesn't work on ideas. It works on perception. Margot nods once. I agree, she says. But perception isn't fixed. She leans forward now, not aggressively, but intentionally. It changes based on who's willing to challenge it. A pause. And who isn't? That last line hangs in the air like a spark waiting for something to ignite. A few people in the audience react audibly, soft, "Oh-s," a couple of stunned laughs that quickly fade. Because now there's no mistaking it. This isn't just a conversation anymore. It's a confrontation. One of the co-hosts jumps in quickly, her voice slightly higher than before. I think what Whoopi means is that there are structures, systems, that don't just change because one person decides to push back. Margot turns her head toward her, nodding politely. Of course, she says. But every shift starts with someone deciding not to play by the same expectations. Her gaze drifts back to Whoopi, and accepting the consequences of that. Whoopi leans back slowly, folding her hands in her lap this time. And what do you think those consequences are? She asks. Margot doesn't hesitate. Being misunderstood, she says. A beat. Being dismissed. Another beat. And being told you're still in a box, even when you're actively trying to step out of it. The audience reacts again, this time louder, more divided. Some clap. Others exchange uncertain looks. Because now the lines aren't just drawn. They're being reinforced. Whoopi watches her closely, her expression unreadable. You know, she says after a moment, there's a difference between stepping out of a box and pretending it's not there. The words are quieter this time, but they cut deeper. Margot's jaw tightens just slightly, and for the first time, the emotion beneath her composure becomes visible. Not anger, but something close. Frustration. Not loud, not explosive, but controlled, contained. Focused. I'm not pretending it's not there, Margot replies. I'm saying it doesn't have to define the limits of what I do. Whoopi tilts her head. But it still defines how you're seen. Margot's response comes quicker now. Only if I let it, she says. The tension spikes again. Sharp. Immediate. The audience feels it. Some leaning forward, others holding their breath, caught between fascination and discomfort. Because this has gone far beyond anything they expected when they walked into a daytime talk show taping. One of the co-hosts lets out a nervous laugh. This might be the most intense conversation we've had all week, she says, trying to break the pressure. A few scattered chuckles follow. But they don't last, because neither Margot nor Whoopi smiles. They're locked in now. Focused. Unyielding. Whoopi leans forward again, resting her elbows lightly on the table. And what happens, she asks, when the audience doesn't follow you out of that box? That question lands differently. It's not a challenge. It's a reality check. And for the first time in several minutes, Margot pauses longer than a breath. You can see it, the calculation, the awareness, the weight of that question settling in. Because this one doesn't just touch on perception. It touches on consequence, on risk, on failure. The room waits, silent. Margot's gaze drops for just a fraction of a second, then lifts again, stronger. If they don't follow, she says, her voice steady but quieter now, then that's part of the risk. A beat. But I'd rather take that risk than stay somewhere I've already outgrown. The words land with a different kind of impact. Less sharp, more final. A wave of applause builds, slow at first, then growing, filling the studio with a sound that feels less like excitement and more like recognition. Because something just shifted. Not in the tension, but in the tone. Whoopi doesn't interrupt this time. She lets the applause settle, lets the moment breathe. And when she speaks again, her voice is different. Not softer, but less combative, more grounded. That's a hard road, she says. Margot nods. I know, and not everyone makes it. Whoopi adds. I know that too. Another pause. This one isn't sharp. It's heavy, layered. Because now, beneath the confrontation, there's something else. Understanding. Not agreement, but acknowledgement. Whoopi studies her for a long moment. Then, a faint smile touches the corner of her mouth. Not amused, not dismissive, but respectful. You've thought about this, she says. Margot lets out a quiet breath, the tension in her shoulders easing just slightly. More than people think, she replies. A small ripple of laughter moves through the audience, gentler now, less charged. But the energy hasn't disappeared. It's evolved. Because this is no longer just about pushing back. It's about standing firm. One of the co-hosts leans in again, cautiously optimistic. I think what's interesting here is that both of you are talking about the same thing, just from different sides. Whoopi nods slightly. Margot glances at her. And for the first time since the exchange began, their eye contact doesn't feel like a standoff. It feels like recognition. But just as the tension begins to settle, a voice from the audience cuts through. Clear. Unscripted. So what is the box then? The room turns. Heads pivot. Producers freeze. Because that question, that wasn't planned. And now, every eye is back on the table. Back on Margot. Back on Whoopi. Waiting. Because whatever comes next. For a split second, no one moves. The question hangs there, raw, unscripted, impossible to ignore. So what is the box then? The audience member who asked it doesn't shrink back. If anything, they lean forward like everyone else in the room, pulled into the gravity of this moment. Producers exchange quick, panicked glances off stage. One of them lifts a hand slightly, as if to signal a cut, to regain control. But it's too late, because now the most honest moment of the entire segment has just arrived. And everyone knows it. At the table, Margot Robbie and Whoopi Goldberg both turn, almost in sync, toward the audience. Then slowly back to each other. A silent agreement passes between them. Answer it. Margot inhales first. Her voice, when it comes, is steady, but stripped of performance now. No polish. No strategy. Just truth. The box, she says, is the version of you that people decide is enough. The room stills. No murmurs this time. No gasps. Just silence. Because that answer doesn't just land, it settles. Whoopi watches her closely, but she doesn't interrupt. Margot continues, her eyes briefly scanning the audience before returning to the table. It's the expectation that once you've been understood one way, you should stay that way. That you owe people consistency more than growth. A few people nod instinctively. Others sit back, absorbing it. And when you try to step outside of that, Margot adds, her voice gaining strength, that's when it gets uncomfortable. Not just for you, but for everyone watching. The weight of her words spreads through the room like a slow ripple. Whoopi finally shifts, leaning forward, not to challenge this time, but to meet it. And you think that's what's happening right now? She asks. Margot doesn't hesitate. I think this conversation is part of it. A small reaction from the audience, half awe, half disbelief. Because she just said it. Out loud. Whoopi exhales through her nose, almost like a quiet laugh. But there's no humor in it. Fair enough, she says. A beat. Then she turns slightly, addressing the audience as much as Margot. The box, Whoopi says, is also what protects you. That changes the energy again. Subtle, but important. It's what gives people a way to understand you quickly, she continues. It's what keeps the industry moving, labels, categories, expectations. Without that, everything gets messy. Margot nods slowly. I agree, she says. But messy isn't always bad. Whoopi glances back at her. No, she admits. But it's risky. Margot smiles faintly. I know. A pause. Not tense this time. Not sharp. Just real. The kind of pause that only happens when both sides have stopped trying to win and started trying to understand. The audience feels it. You can see it in their faces, in the way they've leaned in, not for drama now, but for meaning. One of the co-hosts finally speaks, her tone softer than at any point before. I think what's fascinating about this is that we're watching two different experiences of the same system collide in real time. No one laughs. No one interrupts. Because she's right. Whoopi nods once, then looks back at Margot. You're still early in your journey, she says. Whether you like that or not. Margot lets out a quiet breath, half a smile forming. I know. And you're going to face that box again, Whoopi adds. Over and over. Margot's expression doesn't change. I expect to. Another pause. Then Whoopi leans back, her voice softer, but more certain than ever. What matters, she says, is whether you let it close in on you or whether you keep pushing it out. Margot holds her gaze. I plan to keep pushing. And just like that, the tension breaks. Not in a burst, but in a release. The audience erupts, not with shock this time, but with something deeper. Applause that builds and builds, not because of conflict, but because of what came out of it. Understanding, respect, maybe even admiration. The cameras pan across faces, some smiling, some thoughtful, some still stunned by what they've just witnessed. Because this wasn't just an interview. It was a moment, one that feels bigger than the room it happened in. As the applause continues, the hosts begin to transition, the rhythm of the show slowly returning. But something has changed. You can feel it in the way they speak, in the way they look at Margot now. Not just as a guest, but as someone who held her ground. Whoopi turns slightly toward her again, her expression calm, almost reflective. Good conversation, she says simply. Margot nods. Yeah, she replies. It was. And that's it. No dramatic handshake. No forced laugh. Just a quiet acknowledgement of what just unfolded. The segment fades out. The cameras cut. But the moment doesn't end there. Because within minutes, clips of the exchange begin to spread. First on social media, short, sharp snippets. The line about the box. The pushback. The silence. The reactions. Then the headlines follow. Margot Robbie pushes back live on The View. Unexpected tension turns into powerful moment. Whoopi Goldberg and Margot Robbie's exchange has everyone talking. Debates ignite across platforms. Comment sections flood with opinions. Some praising Margot for standing her ground, others siding with Whoopi's perspective, arguing that the industry's realities can't just be challenged with words. Clips rack up millions of views. Reactions pour in from fans, critics, fellow actors. Some call it bold. Others call it risky. But no one calls it forgettable. And that's the thing about moments like this. They don't just exist in the room where they happen. They ripple outward. They shift conversations. They make people pause, question, rethink. Back in the quiet after the show, as the lights dim and the set begins to empty, the echoes of that conversation still linger. Because something real happened here. Something unscripted. Something that couldn't be packaged or predicted. Two perspectives collided, and instead of collapsing into noise, they created something sharper. Clearer. More honest. And now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Margot right to push back? Or did Whoopi have the stronger point about how the industry really works? Drop your thoughts in the comments. We're reading every single one. And if you want more moments like this, raw, intense, and impossible to ignore, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit like, and stay tuned. Because the next story might be even bigger.